I'm so excited to introduce you to today's guest. I have a special guest on today. It is my sister, Karisa Kenyon. She moved to Colorado about a year ago, so I get to see her more often. She has a coaching program that she takes people through. And today we're going to talk about our hike on the Appalachian Trail. We did it a couple of years ago and hiked for a week the Georgia section. And together, we did this and had so much fun. We're going to share that experience with you. And we learned, yes, we can do hard things, but it's more fun to do hard things together. Who's the person you're being? Are you satisfied? Welcome to Be the Person, a podcast for the brave and the curious, for people ready to explore their true potential. I'm your host, Annie Randall. Join me and let's get ready to go on this journey together. Welcome to Be the Person podcast. I'm really excited today because I have a very special guest with me today. My sister Karisa is on with me. Karisa, welcome to Be the Person.
Thanks, Annie. Excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you. And a few years ago, we decided to do the Appalachian Trail hike, the beginning 80 miles together. And I had actually seen a girlfriend do this hike, and I decided that I definitely wanted to do this. And I think Jeff got super nervous because he thought, oh my gosh, I'm going to get roped into this. And I thought, I don't want Jeff along because he'll complain the entire week. And so it was kind of funny because he said, well, you either have to learn to shoot a gun or bring somebody else with you. And I kind of laugh at the shooting a gun because I would shoot myself in the foot. So I didn't even hesitate. Like you were the first person I thought of. And I called to ask you to hike the Appalachian Trail. And just curious your thoughts when I made that call to you.
Well, I was a little surprised because backpacking is not really your thing. And so I just remember you calling and talking to me and saying, like, hey, I need to do 100 miles of the Appalachian Trail and you need to come with me. And I was like, really? I'm not sure either of those are true, but okay, let's explore. So we did. So we talked about why you wanted to do it, and we talked about what you wanted to do, and then what was sort of realistic in the time frame and days and ideas that we had. And it actually turned out to be an amazing adventure for both of us. So super glad I did, and was super kind of honored that you called me and asked, because I think it takes a lot of courage to ask somebody to join you on something where you're not quite sure what's going to come out.
Yeah, that was definitely the case for me. I was not quite sure what was going to come out because the only other time I had ever slept hiking anywhere with a backpack was with you. I think 25 years before we hiked one night in Yosemite, and that was my experience.
Yeah. Yep. I think I actually went and found that picture of us on top of one of the falls there. So, yeah, amazing.
It was very much, I think, probably for both of us. I have this goal and I just pick a number 100 miles. Sounds good to me. Let's go. How fast? How hard can we do it? And you're like, wait a
Mhm.
minute. Why do you have to do 100 miles? Which I think was a super good question because really it was only like a round number and it sounded good. But I think when we really went back and just look at, okay, what makes sense? Your route made much more sense.
Yeah. Well, we started talking about how many miles do you think you can actually hike in a day with a full pack on? And then what even is a full pack? Because I think that that was a pretty unknown question at the time. So,
Yeah, for sure. Because we had to, again, I owned zero camping, zero backpacking, and don't even have a clue what to buy in this whole experience. So I think just that was part of the preparation and honestly part of the fun into not only set the trail, and I still set a pretty aggressive trail hike because if we're out there, like we might as well just go as much as we can. But it was fun to do the training and kind of go back and forth.
Mhm.
You had much more experience and gear than I did. But what was it like for you to prepare?
Well, one, I hadn't done a lot of backpacking for a while. So I've done a lot in general, maybe, but not for a while. So it was kind of going back and just starting to look to say, and I had moved and had stuff kind of in lots of different places. And so trying to figure out what I actually had and what that looked like. And then really going back, backpacking is a lot about preparation. So it's a lot about figuring out what's necessary, having a plan, working through that plan with, like we were going as partners. And I remember us talking about like, we have to be good partners for each other. No matter what happens, we're out there together and it's really just us. And we were on a pilgrimage trail. So that was a first for me. I hadn't done that before. I'd always gone backpacking way out in the middle of nowhere and had always been kind of out there either by myself or with, maybe one or two other people. So part of it was, making sure that you and I were on the same page about that and that we were thinking about it the same. And so I feel like we had lots of conversations about, okay, what do we have? What do we need? How do we prepare? What's our kind of target weight for our backpacks? Because we were doing a pretty aggressive trip. I mean, our first day was 17 miles and lots of elevation gain and loss. And so every extra pound you have, that's a long way to carry it. And so I just remember us like working through that process and kind of helping each other figure out like, what do we have? How do we plan? How do we get there? And just, like that's part of it. And then part of it is just physically getting ready. So I hadn't been carrying a backpack for a long time. And I had to go buy a new backpack because mine was ancient and start putting sandbags in it and start carrying it around Austin with me at the time. So um yeah, it was an adventure for me as well.
Yeah. I thought that was fun, and honestly, maybe because you're the older sister and usually more prepared, and I just kinda show up and come, but hiking the Appalachian Trail wasn't something that you could just show up for. Like, it did take a lot of preparation.
Yeah.
Physically, it took some preparation, but I think you're right as far as, like, what comes with you. Because I remember weighing that backpack, and 30 pounds was kind of our target weight, which for both of us, we're not super big, so that's a lot of weight to carry, like, as a percentage of your body, and really thinking about what do you really need in that backpack, and really feeling proud of myself at the end, like, I think I used every single thing in the backpack, which was great, exactly what you would want to happen.
Mhm. Yeah, I feel like we were pretty meticulous because I think our target was 30 pounds full of water. And what you learn really fast is water weighs a lot, right?
Yeah.
Then I think it was probably 22 pounds or something was my target without any water. And so that meant all of your clothes, the tent, the camping stove, what you're sleeping in, all of your clothes, everything you need. And you have to be pretty meticulous about that. And it is interesting because it helps you to ask yourself lots of interesting questions because you start out with what you think you want to take and then you look at it and weigh it and you're like, no, that's not it. And so then you go back and you question, what do I really need? Is this really important? And so it was great for us to have to think about that, and you have to be prepared from a food and water perspective as well, because that's really important out there. We I remember looking at the Appalachian Trail and being like, okay, we're gonna cross roads, and there is in general a lot of water there, so we should be pretty good, but you still have to be pretty prepared there.
Yeah. Absolutely. It's made me question even when I pack for another trip that what do I really need? And it
Mhm.
was funny because we went to Europe the following summer and I lived out of a carry-on for 17 days and I think it was
Mhm.
partly from the Appalachian Trail, like, I can do this because you bring so much stuff that you really don't need along with
Yeah.
you.
Well, I'm a pretty committed carry-on only person. So even when we go to Europe for a month, I'm pretty much always on the take a carry-on plan. So,
Yeah.
yep. So,
And I feel like we did do a good job. We did some compromising along the way. We did like, you get this, I'll get this. But
mhm,
even from a perspective, there was kind of some funny misses in there because I really did
yeah.
think that you love to camp. And so one of the nights out of all of them, we went back to a hotel. And I remember thinking it was almost like I, I was cheating. You're going, but I'm like, I can only go so long without a shower and washing my clothes and just doing the things. And you're like, I don't even really like to camp. I'm like, what do you mean you don't like to camp? That's why we're out here.
No, I don't love to camp. And usually, if I'm going camping, it's so I can be far away in the dark where it's peaceful. And so, yeah, I mean, it was a really big shift for me to be like, we're going to be on the Appalachian Trail where there's lots of people and big campgrounds, and and we had a really good mix of like camping and campgrounds, which the last night I loved, but before that I honestly did not love. We had a couple nights where we were out by ourselves, which I think was great, but that's always a bit harder. And I was very happy for us to go back and have a hotel for that night, and just be able to have a shower and get clean and warm. And I think we missed the night that it rained the worst as well. And I think we hiked out that whole day in the rain. So yeah, I was pretty happy to get there as well. And I just remember us making s'mores by the campfire that night. So being like, yep, I'll have another one. Feel like I've earned it.
Yes, absolutely. We did. We walked all day in the rain that day, and then it would have rained on us at night. So I was glad to have that hotel too. And we went in, you walk into a town, and then there was these rides that we had coordinated ahead of time, but we were
Mhm.
waiting for one. And I think we are in the grocery store just getting like a deli sandwich or something. There wasn't a lot of options. And I remember you looking at me and you said, "You look really homeless." And I think you smell like it too. Which just made me laugh of really outside of my comfort zone, doing this trip, having this backpack, and then looking like a homeless person as well.
Yeah, I think both of us were pretty grungy at that point. We'd been out for 4 days, and we had walked for, I don't know, probably 6 or 7 hours in the rain. And, so we were a bit drenched. And I think the people when we checked into the hotel kind of thought we might be like homeless little drenched rats as well. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I think
But
you brought up a good point. Like sometimes there was a couple nights there was a campground, and part of the time then we were
mhm,
out in the middle of nowhere,
mhm.
which I probably preferred the campground. The out in the middle of nowhere, it just makes me nervous of like, I don't know, somebody was coming to get us, or there was going to be a bear, or who knows what I thought was coming. But it was a good mix to have both on the hike.
And it's true though, when you're out in the middle of nowhere, you're a lot more likely to have a bear. And I remember one night when we were out, like we had a guy walk by, at 10 o'clock, and like he had his headlamp on so you can see where people are seeing. And he stared at our tent for an awfully long time. And I think it made us nervous. He was maybe just curious, didn't stop, nothing happened. But, at that point, you become much more aware that you're on your own. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
One of the things that I was proud of because you get poison oak and poison ivy. So
Yes.
you stayed more on the trail, and I was in charge of putting up the bear bag, which
Yes.
again, you guys very outside of my comfort zone. I did not even know that you would need a bear bag, but I would be out in the middle of the field or by the tree trying to toss this thing up and hike it up and tie it so
Mhm.
no bears could get it. And just being in charge of that and learning that. honestly, it was fun to experience that out there.
Yeah, and you had to do that, and you had to go get it because, yeah, I wasn't going out in the middle of the poison ivy to get it, so, yeah.
Yeah.
If I would have been by myself, that would have been really challenging for me, so mhm,
Yeah. We started in April at the beginning in Georgia. So the Appalachian Trail is over 2,000 miles long. It goes from Georgia to Maine.
mhm,
And a lot of people, they want to be through hikers. So if you want to do that, typically you start in April in Georgia and then you hike all the way up. And we started in April too, knowing that we were just doing like the Georgia section, that 80 miles. But we met a lot of interesting people along the way. And one of the guys that I remember meeting
yeah.
was that gentleman that was getting a divorce and his backpack. We were just amazed at how much stuff he had. You remember that guy?
Yep, I do, and he had everything with him. So he had books and hammocks and tents and extra fuel and, like, all of these things, and I think he had already dropped weight by the time we met him, and he was probably only, what, 17 or 20 miles in, and, and he had brought stuff that he had already given away, and I think his backpack still weighed, like, 70 pounds. So it was interesting too because I feel like it was a place where you start to really understand that, like, I'd never been on a pilgrimage trail before, and you understand that people have their physical backpack and what they bring, but they also have their metaphorical backpack. And for him, I think those two went hand in hand. He was carrying a lot both physically and, mentally and emotionally, and part of the process was going to be how he made it through that hike doing that. So
Yeah. I wish that we could know like what happened with him and some of the other people along the hike, but him in
mhm,
particularly, I think of like how far did he make it? Did he make it all the way? What did he look like at the end? What did he learn? Because
mhm,
even though we were just there a week, you learn a lot about yourself in that time
you
and
do.
really what you're capable of.
Mhm. Yeah, you learn a tremendous amount, and you learn to overcome things. Like, we had at least a couple of times where we had a hard time finding water, and sometimes we were able to go off trail and find water, and sometimes we ended up asking the people in the parking lot for water. And I think it's a process. You learn that people are generally good and there to take care of you and helpful, and if you search long enough you'll figure it out. So I remember us at least having a few challenges like that and feeling really proud of overcoming those challenges and feeling really proud of how you and I worked together, because I feel like we did a great job of, staying good partners to one another throughout the process. So if one of us was up, the other might be down, and we would be encouraging. And, like when you needed somebody to lead, like, I would try to take over and vice versa. And so, yeah, you learn a lot about yourself, and you also learn a lot about the people you're with and what partnership means.
Absolutely. I think that was one of the questions Jeff asked me, like, did you get irritated with your sister? Did you guys get on each other's nerves? And I said, honestly, we didn't. Like, we just, I don't know, we did it really well together. Because
Mhm.
when you spend 24/7 with somebody for a week and you're just going, like that
Yep.
can be, you can get on each other's nerves, but I don't feel like that happened.
Yeah, I feel like we did a great job of navigating that because you're in very close quarters and you're with them every second of the day. And, I feel like we both found compassion for each other in different ways. We had different challenges and we were there supporting each other, which was amazing.
Yeah. One of the things you mentioned, like one of the times you felt proud, does one like thing stand out to you, like in the trip, either one time or the trip in general, something that really did make you proud?
Well, I think I've been proud of you since the time you picked up the phone and called. Because I know that this is in general outside of your comfort zone. And then just, I don't know, I found myself just being proud to be there and support you throughout the whole trip because I felt like it was something that was really hard and challenging for both of us, but much further outside your comfort zone. And we just kept navigating things, whether they were the little things like we can't find water and we're thirsty and we got to go look, or some of the bigger things like my knees or your hips hurt and we're going to have to like change the pace or change the place where we're going. I i think that throughout the process I felt really proud that we were there together and that we were figuring out how to do what we wanted to do and still have fun together and still work together as a team. So I think there was like a million little moments for me. So
Mhm.
yeah.
I love that. It was one of those years in 2022, that's the year we did it. It was the year that I don't know why, I just decided to say yes to a lot of things that scared me.
Mhm.
And there was a lot of things that year that really did. This was outside my comfort zone. But when you see somebody else do something and you're like, I could do that. Like, and that's what I saw in my girlfriend. And that's what I hoped people saw in us. Like, yes, it's outside their comfort zone. They may not know exactly what they're doing. It didn't all go perfectly. It was a ton of fun. But I think it gives people permission to do what they want to do when you
Mhm.
go out and make yourself proud.
Yep. Yeah. And I was really proud of how we did that together because there's a lot of places where it could have fallen apart, right? Like, or it could have been less pleasant. And, even when we both needed to stop and take a breath, we did. And then we laughed and then we went on. And that's pretty amazing.
Yeah. Anything in particular that stood out to you, like during the hike?
One of the moments that will stand out for me forever is I think we had been in for 4 days and we were going out to go to the hotel. And so for 4 days, we had agreed that we would not listen to a lot of music or do things like that. So had in general been, in the forest, in the quiet, talked to a few people, but not a ton. Had hiked out that last day in the rain and we were hustling to get to our ride on time. So we were moving as fast as we could, soaking wet, cold, a little hungry at that point. And we got into that lady's car and she had the music cranked up. And the song that came on, I'll never forget it. It's still on my playlist and it still makes me laugh. And both of us just jumped like out of our skin because it was so loud and we were so not used to like just music and like being back in sort of society. And I will never forget that moment. I don't know why that stands out so much, but I think sometimes we forget how much noise there is in our daily lives, and then you go out and you get to a place that's quiet, and when you walk back in sometimes it's a little bit shocking.
And she had such this big black truck, and she was
Yeah.
kind of like smoked a lot, and her voice sounded like it. The
Yes.
nicest woman, but man, she was like a little rough, and she played that music very loud.
Yes. Yeah, I think both of us looked, and I just remember us like turning and looking at each other, and then kind of being like, "Wow, okay, we're back. Like, here's the world again." So,
Yes.
yeah.
Have you been confused about what to eat, when to eat, and overall the best things to do for your health? I've created a free guide for optimal health just for you. It'll help you live healthier, make more confident choices, and know exactly which choices you should make on food, timing of your food, and so much more. You're not going to want to miss this guide. The link to get the free guide is in the show notes. So we get to the last day or the last night, and I loved it because we were in a campground. There was a whole bunch of people around, which on that was really the only night that happened of like there's a campfire you're
Yeah.
out there talking to a lot of people and just sharing your story of like why you're there. But nobody really says who they are when they're not on the trail, which I kind of loved about you just got to be there and enjoy the time, enjoy the campfire, and just have that time around there. And there were several people. Do you remember that night?
I love that night. That was probably my favorite night, and it's probably the thing that would make me, like, try a campground again. Because a lot of them we had tried, I had been like, "Okay, whatever." But that night, we had a campfire, everybody was there talking, or maybe not everyone, but several of the people were there talking, and we just had a great conversation. Yeah, it just really allows you to connect with people about where you are in that moment and not so much about the rest of your life.
Yeah, agree. And we go to bed that night and everything is great. You can like get up the next morning and everything is great. And I remember going back in the tent. I lay down to get my shorts on and change. And that night, I had rolled over back and forth a
Yeah.
bunch because I was having hip surgery the week after, and my hip was really hurting. And I sit up, and the whole world just starts spinning. And I know what it is. I've had vertigo before,
Oh,
but I've never had vertigo without Jeff being there where the whole world just spins. And immediately I just kind of panic because I know this is a really big deal because I can't function no matter how much suck it up you have. Like
yeah.
I crawl out of that tent and you're like, oh my gosh, what is wrong with you?
Well, actually, I was sitting right next to you when you sat up because you grabbed my arm, and I think I probably had claw marks in my arm.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
And you were just like, "Chris, I have vertigo," and I was like, "Okay, we're in trouble." It was just very, and I was like, "Okay, so what do like you were just sitting there and you were having a hard time and you were gripping my arm and finally got you to let go of my arm just a little." And and yeah, then we just kind of started the process of trying to figure out, what to do about that because it is really scary. We were about 3.5 miles from a road. We had planned to do 10 miles that day, um, which I found very funny because I think you were very scared and unsure about how to go forward, but completely unwilling to scrap the 10 miles. Um, and I just remember like thinking like, okay, just work through the process. Just keep going. We're gonna figure this out. It might not look like anything that you understand now, but just keep going. We'll figure it out. And so yeah, I think we just started that process. And at that point I was incredibly grateful to be in a campground because people sort of knew something was going on, even if they didn't understand at first. And yeah, and then just started the process of trying to help you get out of the tent, sit on your camp mat, have some fresh air, you know. Um, thank goodness we're in a place where we had internet connectivity. So I called Jeff and he's trying to explain the uplete procedure to me and what you do. And I'm Googling it and eventually able to watch a little video. And I just remember trying that and just like like my heart just goes out to you because you were so brave, but you were also so scared. And we were so not sure what was going to happen at that point.
Yeah. Because on the Epley, we tried it like on the ground. I'm just laying on the ground and I'm horribly sick. And you're like, it's not working. And luckily, that was probably the only time on the trail there was a bench. And you're like, okay, we have to get over to the bench. But like it's between a roller coaster and the tilt a world of like you telling me to walk over there. And I'm like, I can't. And I just think I crawled along the ground. So the people in the campground were probably like, what in the world is going on over there?
Well, actually, at this point, one of the guys who was camped next to us, who we had talked to quite a bit the night before, was actually a doctor. And so I had gone to him and said, "Hey, do you know how to do this?" And he's like, "No, I know it can be really effective, but I don't know." And I said, "Okay, well, I'm going to need some help." And so we didn't let you crawl. We actually picked you up and took your camp mat over there and carried you over there, but kind of under protest. So, but it was interesting because I think, we had set you on your camp mat next to the tent, and I kind of was just in the mode of like solve one problem at a time, right? Because I knew we were going to have a long day. I knew it was going to be hard, and we were going to get out. I just didn't know how. But I was like, okay, I can't solve all the problems, but I just need to solve one at a time. And so I would I would come and sit with you, and then you would be like, "Okay, I'm okay for a few minutes." And so then I would go, like, I got those 2 guys to go get the bear bag because I couldn't do it because there's poison oak there. So I'm like, "Can you go take my bear bag down and not let anything touch the ground?" And I had been like alternating packing up our camp and trying to get organized and trying to get people coordinated to do things. And um yeah, and so then we realized like this, like just wasn't going to work to do it on the ground. And so we're trying to get you over to the little platform that was there. And so they actually helped. We actually got you to stand up, and then we actually got them to help you come over there. And there was a very nice lady who also came and she just kind of sat with you while I would run around and do stuff. And I'd come back and check, and we'd do another version of that. You'd be like, okay, I think it's maybe a little better, or, however we were calibrating. And just, I'd be like, okay, and just sit there with you. And she just sat there and talked to you for like an hour, probably off and on.
Yeah, she
And
was a super nice lady. And sometimes the applet will work and it makes a difference right away. And that time it didn't. We probably did it, I don't know, 2 or 3 times with Jeff walking us through exactly how, because I knew how to do it, but in the moment, there was no way I could explain that to you. So I am thankful that he was on the ground, and
yeah,
it took a while. But at the moment, I'm thinking, we have this 3.5 miles down the hill to get to a road.
yeah,
And that might have been like 3,000 miles to me in my mind. Like, I don't know if I can do this. And
mhm,
it's just an interesting perspective because normally, again, I'm like the suck it up, like you can make it. And this was one where there
yeah,
was just no sucking it up. It was going to
yeah,
be hard.
yeah. Well, and I kind of thought at one point that I was probably carrying you out, which probably would have been really, really bad for both of us. But I figured it's 3.5 miles. I can do it in a day. It's probably not going to be a good day, but it's going to be a day. So, but it's interesting because I was, like I found these guys who are willing to carry your backpack down. So I sent your backpack down with them, not realizing the car keys were in there. You know, ask them just to leave it at the road, leave it by the thing, like try to, maybe put it under the picnic table. And then um, I got the guys who were helping us to carry a little bit of the other stuff and then put the rest of it in my backpack. And we got to a point where, I think it took probably 2.5 or 3 hours where everything was packed up, everything was taken care of, and you could at least kind of stand up. So gave you both of the hiking poles and put everything in my backpack. And I had such bad blisters at that point. I was wearing my flip flops and carrying probably a 40-pound pack and super worried about you. And I was like, okay, we're going 10 steps at a time. And you were like, I was like, can you take 10 steps? You were like, yeah, I think I can. I'm like, okay, that's amazing. So here we go. We're just, don't worry about how far it is. Don't worry about what's going on. Just 10 steps at a time. So that's how we started. And I had rearranged everything to make sure the guy was going to meet us there. And, I think once we got going, once we got the 10 steps, and then I would literally just stop and I'd be like, take a breath. Are you okay? And sometimes you'd be like, yep, good to go. And other times you're like, nope, need a moment. I was like, okay, we have as long as you need. And I don't know if you remember that, but we just kind of just started like, don't think about how far it is. Don't think about what you have to do. Just think about these 10 steps. And that's where we're going. And I kind of thought that at some point that it might get worse or whatever, and we might just have to abandon that. But I was like, if we could just take 10 steps, we'll make progress. And we did.
Yeah. And it was like once we got going, then it was okay. I mean, it wasn't great. It was still a really long 3 miles, probably a very slow 3 miles. Um,
Mhm.
Thank you for being patient. But I think that's life of sometimes like you don't
Yeah.
know the outcome. Like honestly, I didn't know if I could make it that 3 miles, but you just do the thing
Yeah.
right in front of you and then you figure out the next thing to do.
Well, from my perspective, every 10 steps you took was 10 steps I didn't have to carry you. So progress was good. So, yeah.
But one thing I remember seeing that we had not seen that whole entire time was that huge snake crawl across the trail, and I was glad I didn't see that before because I would've had nightmares about it, but I was like, "Oh my goodness," that got my heart racing.
Yeah. Cause we're walking and yeah, I just remember stopping and you were like, no, I can go. And I'm like, snake. And you were like, what? Okay.
Yeah.
Luckily, he just went straight across the trail and then moved on. So,
Mhm.
yeah, it was much more paranoid after that. So, especially being in flip flops as well. So,
Absolutely. Well, we made it down, and our gentleman that was supposed to meet us was there, and he took us back to the Atlanta airport. We actually flew home that night. I flew to Denver, he flew to Austin.
mhm,
I remember wiping off in the airport. It's still pretty darn shaky, but there was some little perfume shop, and I remember they had those little samples, and I
yep.
put one on, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, this smells so good."
Both of us did actually. And we're like, wow, we smell so much better.
Mhm. I went and bought that perfume afterwards. I don't know if it really smelled that good or it was just that day, but I just loved it.
Yeah. Yeah, it was amazing at that point for sure. So, yeah. Yeah, and I remember walking you to your gate and you're like, "No, I'm fine." I'm like, "No, you're definitely not fine. And you are going to tell them you hurt your back and you're not going to try to lift your backpack over your head." You're like, "No, I'm fine." I'm like, "It's either I'm flying to Denver or you're doing this." You were like, "Okay." So, but you were a trooper. You made it home. You were able to navigate that. And yeah, it was it was amazing.
Yeah. A little firecracker at the end for us, I guess. But, it was probably another year and I had vertigo on and off. And it is really scary to have it, especially without Jeff or being alone. And I've never had it alone, but probably because I wouldn't go anywhere alone after that for quite a while. But it was like anything else, like, it would get bad and then it would get better and be fine for 6 months, and it finally, has to get bad enough where you decide, "I'm gonna deal with this once and for all," or just at least seek opportunity, sometimes it's not. But then in 2023, it was really like a year journey to figure that out,
Yeah.
so, knock on wood, it won't hopefully will not happen again.
Mhm. Hopefully not. So, yep. And if
Oh,
it does, on our next hike, we'll be more prepared.
right? Exactly.
So,
Biggest lesson or takeaway overall, do you think, from the hike?
um, I don't know what my biggest lesson was. I find myself like really in a place of gratitude for us being able to share that connection, both the really good times and the hard times and the slightly crazy, we're not sure how this is going to happen times. Um, just really grateful for that. And I think it happened to me at a time when I really learned that I could do hard things as well. So I could deal with things that were not planned and not happening as expected because that happened on the trail, but it was also a mirror for me of things that were going on outside of there. It was not in the place I expected to be, but in some ways, it kind of became this place of just finding myself and finding that being out and moving forward is really important.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm grateful you said yes and did it with me on that crazy adventure of just like, I don't know what it's going to be like, but it was fun. We had a lot of laughs along the way. And
We did.
I was still mad that I couldn't do that last 7 miles. And someday I'm going to go back and redo that part. But pretty darn successful as far as getting through all of Georgia in a week was a pretty amazing accomplishment.
Yep. Yeah, I think we still hit about 80 miles, and yeah, maybe we go back and find another part for that. Who knows? So, yeah. I
And I
think
think
also, like for me, I always think about my next adventure. And one of my next adventures, and I'm hopefully you'll come join me for at least part of it, um would be to go and do part of Mount Blanc, the circuit around there. And it's sort of hut to hut hiking, so it's a little different. Um, but I would be really excited to do that. And so my hope is that you'll join me for at least part of that at some time in the future.
Yeah, I think that sounds super fun. And now, it's a whole different ball game. Like when your kids get older, of like we have two in college, and Zach only has 2.5 more years at home. And I think when you're in parenting, it seems like, oh my gosh, that's never going to be possible. But now it's like, yeah, that is going to be really possible.
Mhm,
This whole new life and adventures that we can have.
mhm. Yeah. Hopefully we'll do some of them together. That would be amazing.
Absolutely. Well, I'm in. So we'll plan that trip, and that'll be one of the next things.
Sounds great.
Um, Thanks for being on today. Thanks for talking about this. Thanks for going. It was a super fun adventure. And if you're listening and ever want to think of the Appalachian Trail, I highly recommend it. Or maybe that's not the one you want to go on and there's another one. But just taking that adventure, betting on yourself, saying yes to something that makes you super uncomfortable, because you never know what you're going to learn from it and why you're supposed to be there. So thanks everyone for joining Be the Person podcast. I appreciate you listening. If this resonates with you or you know somebody it would, please share it out. And as always, it would mean the world to me if you would give us a 5-star review. Thanks for joining today.